The last time Oklahoma had a snowstorm 2 days apart was in 1978. It's 2020, and I've thoroughly enjoyed this weather. But I love this time of year, and the blanket of snow that finally covers the earth, the quietness, the beauty that's so exquisite, it's kind of beyond description. But it brings to mind a verse that's found in the 38th chapter of the book of Job. Job's three friends who sit with him in silence for 7 days and then can't contain themselves, they actually tell Job he must be the worst person on the face of the earth to go through the suffering he's facing. And so the majority of that book is going back and forth, their accusations and his answer, and he answers the false premises and conclusions that they actually reach, and shows them actually where those arguments are false. But in the process, Job has some questions of his own. He's wondering, why did God allow this? And really thinks, if I could just have a confrontation with God, I could finally understand this. In chapter 38 of Job, he gets his request, he gets his wish. God asks Job a series of questions, over 30 of them in all. And within those 36 plus questions, a lot of scientific questions are involved. Most of them actually fit in that category, and Job cannot answer any of them. We can, today, answer quite a few of them. In fact, I'll give you an example. In chapter 38 of Job, in verse 22, the statement is made, have you entered the treasury of snow, or have you seen the treasury of hail? Treasury of the snow? Would you be surprised to hear that snow has been referred to over the years as poor man's fertilizer? It may be something that you never have heard. It may sound kind of strange. And yet throughout the 20th century especially, there was a lot of research that was done on the value of snow. In fact, in 1966, kind of in the middle of this discovery phase, there was a Canadian scientist who wrote a paper on the value of snow in that country, and how much fertilizer, how much nitrate it actually placed upon each acre of land. There's a lot of nitrogen in the atmosphere, but the snow actually pulls a lot of that down to the ground and allows the earth to absorb what really is not that usable up in the atmosphere. Here's a question then that actually shows up in the book of Job in chapter 38. And we have an understanding as to what that actually means. Job didn't. In fact, even as small an amount of snow as we receive each winter in Oklahoma, there is still valuable fertilizer that's placed upon every acre of land because of that snowfall. That's remarkable. Not the other questions in Job 38. Let's talk about a couple of them in the time we have together. Verse number 16. Have you entered the springs of the sea, or have you walked in search of the depths? Freshwater springs in the sea? That kind of idea was being thrown around and talked about in scientific circles in the 1920s and 1930s. In the 1970s, when they had finally developed deep submersibles, remote submarines that could reach depths with that unbelievable pressure that depth of water would bring to bear on the hull of any kind of vessel. There are actually pictures that are being taken of freshwater springs coming out of the bottom of the ocean. You find it happening all through the decade of the 70s. In fact, in Science News in January, I think January the 12th of 1980, there's another article. You can actually find pictures of these freshwater springs and the amount of water that's coming out of those freshwater springs into the salt water around it. It's amazing. In fact, even newer than that, they have discovered, scientists have discovered that underneath the oceans there are freshwater reserves that are estimated to be greater than all of the fresh water the earth has used, the surface humanity has used since 1900. over centuries worth of fresh water buried underneath the floor of the ocean. Who would have thought? But as far as freshwater springs, Job could not have known that, had no way of understanding that. We have pictures of that. There's something else that's stated. The statement's made in verse 24, by what way is light diffused? Remember, even in elementary school, seeing a prism being put up toward the sunlight that's coming into the classroom, and you see the rainbow of colors that hit the other wall as the frequency of light is diffused into various wavelengths. So here's the statement again. By what way is light diffused? Humanity discovered that in 1650 A.D. How is it a question that shows up in Job chapter 38? And those kind of questions that really give us some insight or raise a curiosity of humanity are not just found in the book of Job. For example, in Psalm chapter 8, there's a verse that captured the imagination of a young naval officer in the 1850s. Matthew Fontaine Maury, a commander, a naval commander, who's classified today as the father of oceanography, the father of naval meteorology, and the pathfinder of the seas. In Psalm chapter 8 and verse 8, a statement is made about the birds of the air and the fish of the sea that pass through the paths of the sea. Commander Murray actually went through years of painstaking research, ship's logs, a lot of things, and came up with not just wind currents, but water currents. It's not just the flow of the wind, the flow of the air, but of the water itself, the pathfinder of the seas. The imagination of a young naval officer that's sparked by a verse in Scripture that seems rather remarkable proves to be very true. So as you enjoy the rest of the beauty of this snowy day, whether or not you're enjoying it from the inside or maybe hopefully, as I hope to do, playing on a sled later on if we can find a hill, remember the wonders of the creation that God has given, the magnificence that unfolds at His hand. Be thankful for everything that He gives us. In the midst of difficult days, blessings that still remain. And give God the praise and the thanks due His name. Enjoy the day. Enjoy the week. Please stay safe. We'll talk again soon.